Hello, and in this video I'm going to describe a school rule that I agree or disagree with. And I should say what the rule is, how the rule helps students, what effect the rule has, and explain whether I agree with it or not. A school policy I would like to discuss is the ban on using mobile phones during school hours. Honestly, I couldn't stand this rule at first, since I feel that as a college student we should be allowed to do whatever we want. Furthermore, I had a humiliating experience in my first year, since I was using my phone and my teacher spotted me and reprimanded me. I despised that teacher at the time, and although I thought I was right, as a student I felt powerless. From then on, I obeyed the rule half-heartedly. But with time, I realised that my teacher was spot on. Using a phone in class distracts me from the lesson, and consequently, I don't understand the topic. Besides, it's also disrespectful to my teacher. Luckily, I learned my lesson, and as a result, I now observe the rule. As a direct result of this, my grades have gone up. I'm incredibly grateful to this teacher, because I now understand that gadgets tend to distract us, not only in class, but also when we are reading books or going through our notes. When we refrain from using our phones, we can focus on getting higher grades. I totally understand now that school does not just impose rules that are pointless. They are actually in the learner's interests. Finally, if I could give a piece of advice to teenagers who are addicted to phones, I would say phones serve a purpose, but they are supposed to be used properly. So if there is a rule prohibiting their use, then obey it. So let's take a look now at some of the good things in this model answer. So the question was about a school rule. Here I've used a synonym, a school policy. The ban, this means you're not allowed to use something. It's a noun and a verb, to ban, the ban. Remember to have a range of adverbs such as this, honestly, surprisingly, interestingly, frustratingly, annoyingly. So words that you can just pop into sentences, use them at the start of the sentence, and it adds to your fluency and coherence grade because it makes clear what you're going to say next. I couldn't stand. This is a way of saying I hated, I despised, I didn't like, but instead of using didn't like, we're trying to use more complex things. Since, instead of saying because. Some good grammar here, we should be allowed, using modal verbs and using passive form. Furthermore, remember you need to use discourse markers throughout your answers. Instead of saying a bad experience, a humiliating experience, this is where you feel really stupid and silly because the teacher has said something and picked you out of the class and it's embarrassing, it's humiliating. Past continuous, if you know it, use it. It's one that IELTS examiners are really impressed by. I was using, so to describe a long action in the past. Often used with then a past simple that interrupts that action. My teacher spotted me. To spot somebody doing something means to see somebody doing something. Reprimanded me. This means told me off. Despise. This is another way of saying didn't like, couldn't stand. Powerless. Without power. This is useful also in IELTS writing task 2 when you're saying things that like the general public feel powerless. There is nothing they can do to prevent or improve this situation. From then on, it's like saying from that point onwards. This is a really nice idiomatic expression. To obey a rule half-heartedly. If you do anything half-heartedly, you're not giving 100%. It's about 50%. So you can do lots of things half-heartedly. So I completed the task half-heartedly. You're not putting in 100%. With time, a lot of IELTS students try to use things like as time goes by. It's a bit old-fashioned and antiquated. With time is much better. My teacher was spot on. That means right. Distracts me. Something that distracts you, takes your attention away from what you're doing, and very useful for talking about gadgets. Consequently, as a result. Disrespectful, not showing respect. To learn your lesson, this is a good expression, good collocation. We talk about learning your lesson. I learned my lesson. It means I learnt from it. I've already said consequently, so now I say as a result. I observe the rule, and observe the rule, when you observe something, it means you follow it, and that's a good collocation. Another useful phrase both for writing and speaking, as a direct result of this, instead of just saying a result, we can add a direct result, and it makes it more complex. I keep mentioning the use of these adverbs in front of adjectives. I'm incredibly grateful. Don't use very, really. Use much more complex words. And grateful means thankful. Very useful word, gadget, devices, because there are a lot of questions about electronic things, a lot of things in IELTS writing, so make sure you know this word. I mention this verb a lot. I think it's really useful. It makes you stand out if you use it. You can use it in writing and speaking. So tend to distractors, and it means kind of usually, often distractors. If you're using it with it, remember to put the S on the end of tend. So it tends to distractors. Not only, but also, another useful discourse markers. Some present continuous here when we're reading, when we are going through. IELTS examiners love continuous tenses. To refrain from using, when we use refrain, which means to not do something, to not use something, we follow it with from and an ing verb. Refrain from doing. And similarly with focus on, it's with an ing verb, so focus on getting, focus on doing. Another good collocation for writing and speaking, to impose rules, to impose a rule, which means to like introduce a rule. Pointless, having no point, stupid. In the learner's interest, so you could use this with different nouns. In the employer's interests, in the government's interests. So it means they're actually beneficial for them. Finally, good to introduce your final point with something like this, so it lets the IELTS examiner know this is the last thing you're going to say. Advice is uncountable, so we say a piece of advice. Are addicted to, very good for writing and speaking and very useful for lots of other topics. Are obsessed with, are addicted to. If something serves a purpose, it's a collocation. It means it has a purpose. Its purpose, the purpose of phones is to communicate, so they do serve a purpose. They have a useful job. Prohibiting, to prohibit is to not allow, a bit like to ban, and again, very useful for lots of topics if you were talking about the environment, to prohibit use of diesel cars, for example. Okay, thanks for watching this video, and good luck with your IELTS exam.